Hello again, and welcome to the second episode of Formula One Forecast. Okay, so this episode is going to basically kind of round up the 2016 season for any of you who either weren't interested originally to Formula One or who just weren't really following it that well. Or for those of you who do and just, want another opinion on the matter. So for the 2016 season, it was an interesting season, to say the least. It was the last season of the current regulations in Formula One, the current formula, as it's called. Essentially, it was another year of Mercedes dominance. Mercedes started, 4 years ago with a really dominant car and pretty much have been following suit ever since. And this was basically just one more year of that. It was a year of unreliability for the previous champion the year before, Lewis Hamilton. He had several technical issues that kind of cost him a lot of points that he ended up having to make up at the end of the year, and ended up second to his teammate Nico Rosberg by 5 points at the end of the season. Nico Rosberg then became champion. And contrary to what a lot of people say, I really do think he deserved it. You can see in the last 2 seasons or so that he really hated being in Lewis Hamilton's shadow his whole career since karting. And anybody who watches Formula One will pretty much agree that Lewis Hamilton has at least a tenth, if not 2/10 of a second advantage on anyone out there currently. Except for maybe, Fernando Alonso in his prime. But basically, Nico Rosberg knew that. He's known that since, his karting days. And, he kind of figured out his weaknesses and knew Lewis's strengths and basically worked towards Lewis's weaknesses. So, race starts, Nico Rosberg figured those out with the new regulation, used that to his advantage. Nico's always been a very smooth driver, very calculated driver. Must be something with having to be slightly Finnish. Just very meticulous driver. Almost kind of a Prost 2.0 in that respect. He looks at the race, thinks a lot about it more than he races the race, so to speak. He's consistent. I don't want to say he's very fast as compared to some of the other drivers out there, but if you put him in a good car, he will always score second or third. It's kind of where I like to think. So this year he basically took all of his advantages, wrapped them up in a bag, and brought that bag with him the entire season, and never really showed any of his shortcomings that much. Of course, he always, was weaker in qualifying, but everyone's got weaknesses. So kind of wrapping that up, they played tag team all year, and then finally Lewis Hamilton caught up, and there's kind of a big story about he didn't want to let Nico Rosberg catch up, but fighting is fighting, so that's what they did till the last race. Nico Rosberg won the championship then by 5 points. And, of course, Lewis Hamilton looked all dejected, as anyone would who tried as hard as he did for the championship. And so, to move on, this is kind of the part of the video where I kind of segue into the new season. Now, 2016 was a great season, but we are moving now into more exciting regulations. We are going to keep the same 1.6 liter V6 engines with, I believe, they're still going to have the turbos and the kinetic energy recovery system, or KERS, as well as the hybrid system. All that's staying. Nothing's changed in terms of that. Now, what is going to change, for those of you who followed or don't, the cars will be substantially wider, especially the front tires. The rear tires are a bit wider, but mostly the front tires are significantly wider. So if you think about that kind of driving wise, they are going to definitely be power dependent, meaning they're going to have more grip than they will power. So you are going to see 3 to 5 seconds decrease in lap times. I don't think it's going to be that much at first. I think by the end of the season, though, you will be coming up on that 5 seconds decreased lap time once they figure out all the kind of the regulations and things like that. Another thing that they're changing is they're changing a bunch of the small aerodynamic principles that they're allowed to use. They are allowed to use barge boards once again, which kind of have a way of essentially pushing the air around the tires more efficiently and decrease the drag. You know, tires that wide produce quite a bit of drag if you think about it. It's basically 4 giant squares on the car that basically just produce a bunch of drag. So anything you can do to limit that helps out. So that is kind of the regulations. Not too much change. A little bit more fuel allowed per race. You know, everything else has pretty much stayed the same. What will change though is mid to high speed cornering. It will go up exponentially. There's a lot of talks that especially in a lot of famous corners that were just that, corners, are now going to be considered straights, meaning that the driver going through the corner who would usually have to let off on the accelerator and, you know, give them a little bit of drag to help them through the corner, they will not be having to do that anymore. They will basically be flat out during these said corners, which not only will be more exciting for us, but also for the drivers. It's going to be more physical. They're going to be pulling probably another G, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're considering that's happening every single corner times 66 laps or so average a race, that's quite a big difference. That's why, if you'll notice, most of the drivers, according to their Instagrams and things like that, are working out quite heavily to work on their neck strength. I think next year is going to be a whole other beast. I think it's going to be encroaching on the early 2000s formula in terms of, you know, downforce and cornering speed. So that kind of wraps up, you know, sort of the regulation changes that we're going to see. Now let's kind of go into changes that we see in terms of driver lineup. So one of the big things that supposedly is destined to happen is Valtteri Bottas, who's currently contracted for Mercedes next year, will be switching over to, who is contracted at Williams. They're saying he might be moving over to Mercedes. Now, my opinion is that it's most likely not a maybe. He probably will be coming to Mercedes. If I were to put myself in the mindset of, you know, a Toto Wolff or somebody like that, I would look at Lewis Hamilton being the stereotypical fast, angry driver who knows how to get the absolute most out of a car around a lap. And then you have your consistent stereotypical Finnish driver who is consistently scoring points. Most likely he will get second almost every race. Another thing about Valtteri Bottas that a lot of people don't know is that he's been with Williams his entire career. I think, I might be wrong, but I think he might have had a short stint with Sauber, but I could be wrong. But anyway, he has been known to be extremely consistent. He makes very little mistakes, if any. He's, like I say, he's consistent. He makes no mistakes. He's pretty fast. He's probably one of the top 6 fastest guys on the track right now. But around a 1 lap, I don't think he's anywhere near Hamilton. I think in consistency, he will be just like Nico Rosberg. He will be right next to Hamilton every race. Occasionally, he'll pull one out of the bag, I think. But overall, I think it's going to look very similar once again. I do, however, think that in terms of just scale from 1 to 10, Nico Rosberg versus Valtteri Bottas, I would probably rate Valtteri Bottas in terms of well-roundedness. I would probably put him just slightly above Nico Rosberg. I think that's going to happen. I don't think it's a question. That will basically leave Felipe Massa to come out of retirement and go back to Williams, where he will be basically teaching a 18-year-old how to drive an F1 car all year, as well as try to give as much input as he can to the team regarding aerodynamic principles, things like that have changed, setup, things like that. So that's going to happen. I don't think it's a question. I think Mercedes will pick up the safe bet, even though that they will have to pay some big money to get him. Now on to kind of the Red Bull part of the garage. There's kind of an argument who's going to be the higher scorer next year between Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen. My opinion on that is pretty simple. Daniel Ricciardo has proved himself last year to be consistent. He's always putting himself in the right place at the right time, with the exception of a few botched decisions by the team that caused him not to do as well as he could have. He was always there when he needed to be. I see this being probably one of his best years. That is, of course, if Red Bull follows its typical history of doing very well with formula changes. They are extremely good with aerodynamics, and I think with Adrian Newey once again coming in again to assist with that part of the building of the car, I think it's just a no-brainer. I think Red Bull will be right there on top of Mercedes. The one weak point I would, of course, give to Red Bull is their power unit. They are using the Renault engines along with a couple other teams that has been known to be 40 to 60 horsepower, less powerful than the Mercedes engine. I don't know how close they will be next season. Nobody knows. So we'll have to kind of just wait. But I think that assuming that they have a comparable power unit next year, I think they'll be right on top of Mercedes. I think they do have a better chassis. So that's kind of Red Bull. Now, Max Verstappen on the other side, he is a fantastically fast driver. He is aggressive. He knows how to put a car where he wants it. I see him coming right behind Daniel Ricciardo in most races. Keep in mind, he's still very young. He still has a lot of growth to do. I couldn't imagine how he's even grown up as fast as he has in that sport. So I give him all the credit I can, but I don't see him, being a world champion next year like a lot of polls are saying. I think that's a fool's dream. And while he is an amazing driver, and I do think he has some of the supposed flags that show a world champion, I do think he has a lot of them, especially with that drive in Brazil. But I think time will show. I think give him another year, and he'll be right up there. Now, let's move on to the next kind of interesting story, Amana Racing. Now, they basically have till the end of the month, pretty much. I think the 20th, or around the 20th, they have to basically come up with the funds, or at least guarantee that they will acquire funds for the next season. If they do not, then no Manor Racing next year, which will be kind of sad because they've been doing very well for the last couple seasons with extremely low assets. I think their management is pretty strong, and especially with the new Mercedes engine this last season, they were showing a pretty strong face. So I think that with some investment, they could be strong this year, especially with the Mercedes engine once again. And who knows? The 2017 car could be better for a couple races than the Saubers or the Renaults. Who knows? We'll have to see. We don't even know who's going to be driving in the bottom two cars. So we'll have to see. We'll have to keep paying attention. But at this point of the video, I'm going to kind of go into a short prediction of the 2017 season. So I'm only going to do the top 4 drivers. So here's my predictions. So number 1 for the 2017 World Championship, I believe, will be once again Lewis Hamilton. I think that he's in the strongest car, and right now he's the most consistent and fastest driver. It's just, you put those two together, that's a winning combination. I think especially being beaten last year will push him even harder to bring it back. I think that's just almost a no-brainer. Now, second, this is where it kind of gets interesting. I like to, right off the bat, say Daniel Ricciardo. However, that is dependent on who gets the second seat at Mercedes. So, assuming that Mercedes gets a Pascal Wehrlein or more of a backup, so to speak, quality driver, I don't see them getting in second, but I see Daniel Ricciardo being in second in that point. Just because, once again, I think he's right next to Hamilton in terms of raw talent. I don't think he has the same one-lap speed, but they will have a strong car next year, and I do believe that that everything together as a cohesive unit will work great. And I think they will be kind of right on the cusp of the heels of Mercedes throughout the year. So now, on the other side of the coin, if Valtteri Bottas gets the second seat at Mercedes, I think he will be second pretty much all year long. Like I said, again, he's consistent, so he'll be right there behind Hamilton the whole race, every race, I think. So that's kind of my prediction for those two. Now, third place. This is an interesting one. I think either one, Ferrari's going to just come out of nowhere, which I don't see happening. I think they're going to be weak for at least another season or two. They have no management. They've been in debacles for 2 seasons now. So we'll have to kind of wait and see. But if they come out of nowhere, who knows? Maybe a Sebastian Vettel will be in third. But where I really think it's going to be is it's going to be either Max Verstappen coming in behind Daniel Ricciardo, or a possible, Daniel Ricciardo after Valtteri Bottas. Those are kind of my, 3/4 top drivers. I don't see any kind of surprise for fourth. That will be kind of whoever's coming behind those 3 to catch the rest. So most likely a Red Bull car, or who knows, maybe Sergio Perez will have a great year with Force India. Who knows? Everything right now is based off of who shows up in the first 3 races. I don't think you're going to see anything accurately till maybe China. That's when you're going to start seeing cars start showing their true performance. They're going to be sandbagging the first 2-3 races just so that they can kind of get their setups right before they actually start showing their true color. So those are my predictions for the 2017 season. While they are kind of early, I do like to do this. It's kind of fun to see at the end of the year how close I was. Last year I was only 1 driver off with Daniel Ricciardo. I thought he was going to be in second, but he actually ended up not being in second. So with Nico Rosberg winning, I was correct about that, although I thought it was going to be close season, but it really wasn't. So okay, that is the end of this video. My next video will be most likely during the weekend, if not next week. It will be kind of some more information on some articles I've been reading about Formula 1 and some of the new technical regulations, etc., etc. I'm also thinking of possibly doing a game footage video this weekend. I do a lot of F1 2016. I also do some Assetto Corsa, some other various simulators. I'm very much into racing, very much into PC games. Don't worry, I still go outside. But you know, I do have a passion for those things, so I'm thinking of possibly giving some of those. But to wrap up the video, guys, I hope that you guys are liking the stuff. Please be critical. I want to know what I'm doing wrong. I want to know what I can improve. Don't pay attention to the stuff in the background. I'm still building the recording room, so there's quite a bit to do. Everything behind me is going to be covered in foam in another week or two, so we'll have to see when that gets done. But you guys have a good time, and please subscribe. Please like the videos. You know, the more you help me, the more I can accurately and you know, give you guys videos that you want to see, not just the videos I want to give you. So definitely leave me a review. Let me know what you think, what I can change. I do have a minor speech problem. I apologize for that. So I don't know if I stuttered or not, but if I do, that doesn't need to be a comment. It's not something I can change. So without further ado, you guys have a great day, and see you on the next video.